I inherited a garage worthless in his eyes, and my son got the LA penthouse. He called me a useless old woman and locked the door behind me. So I opened the garage, and I froze in place at what I saw. That was the day everything I believed about family shattered. My name is Lillian Parker. I am 68 years old, a widow who thought that after burying my husband, at least my son would stand by me. I was wrong. Remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below if you want to hear more grandma life stories filled with emotion, betrayal, and unexpected strength. The memory of that morning still burns inside me. I walked into the office of Mr. Jacobs, the family lawyer, holding my breath the entire way up the elevator. I thought the reading of Charles's will would be routine, maybe bittersweet, but dignified. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and ink, the heavy curtains pulling in the light so only a dim glow lit the long table. At the far end sat Adrian, my son, in a navy suit that seemed far too sharp for such a somber occasion. He didn't glance at me when I entered. He just kept tapping his fingers on the leather armrest of his chair, as if he already knew he was about to win. I sat down quietly, smoothing the wrinkles on my black dress. My heart beat like a drum in my chest. Mr. Jacobs cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and opened the thick envelope. His voice carried through the room, each word like a stone dropping into still water. Charles Parker, my husband of 42 years, had left his son Adrian the penthouse on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, along with multiple investment accounts. My eyes darted to Adrian. His lips curled into the faintest smirk, and his chin lifted as though the crown of the city had just been placed upon his head. Then Mr. Jacobs continued. To Lillian Parker, my beloved wife, I leave the property located on Magnolia Street in Pasadena, a garage and storage unit that has been in my name for years. Silence followed. I blinked, unsure if I had misheard. A garage? After decades of standing beside my husband through sickness and health, after raising Adrian and building a home together, I was left with a garage? Adrian chuckled under his breath, loud enough that Mr. Jacobs frowned. A garage, Adrian repeated, leaning back in his chair. That's perfect. A dusty old garage for a useless old woman. And me? I get the penthouse. Seems fair, doesn't it? He looked at me for the first time, his eyes cold as glass. I couldn't move. My hands lay flat on the table, trembling slightly. I wanted to defend myself, to say that I had sacrificed everything for him, that I had stayed up through long nights nursing him when he was sick as a child, that I had helped Charles build every brick of our life together. But the words refused to leave my mouth. My throat tightened as though a rope was around it. Mr. Jacobs shifted in his chair, visibly uncomfortable. Mrs. Parker, there may be, he began, but Adrian cut him off. Don't waste your breath. We all know what this means. I am the head of the family now. He stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and placed a hand on Mr. Jacobs's shoulder as if to seal his authority. I sat frozen. The humiliation pressed down on me heavier than any storm. My husband, the man who had promised me we would share everything, had left me with nothing but a garage everyone believed to be worthless. My son, the boy I once rocked to sleep, sneered at me like I was an intruder in his kingdom. I forced my eyes downward, staring at the smooth grain of the table, trying to control my breathing. The garage. That was all I had now. A garage in Pasadena. I imagined dust, broken tools, maybe a rusty old bicycle. My cheeks burned. How could Charles have done this to me? How could Adrian stand there and laugh at my pain? Mother, Adrian said sharply, his voice slicing through the air, don't worry about your little garage. I'll take care of you, if you behave. You can always live under my roof, provided you remember whose roof it is. His smile was smug, and he straightened his tie with theatrical precision. In that moment, the balance of power in our family shifted entirely. Adrian was no longer the boy I had once disciplined, the young man who had once held my hand at his father's hospital bed. He was a man drunk on entitlement, a man who saw me not as his mother, but as an obstacle. I gathered my bag slowly, my legs stiff beneath me. Mr. Jacobs looked at me with pity, his lips pressed tightly as though he wished he could say more, but no words came from him. Adrian had filled the room with his arrogance, leaving no space for compassion. As I walked out of that office, the words echoed in my head. Useless old woman. A garage. Those words clung to me like heavy chains. I stepped into the Los Angeles sunlight, but it felt colder than the shadows inside. Everything I had built, everything I thought I could rely on, had been stripped away with a single stroke of a pen and a single laugh from my only child. And yet something inside me flickered. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was pain hardening into something sharper. But even as I trembled, even as my dignity seemed crushed beneath Adrian's heel, I felt a small ember begin to glow. That garage, if that was all I had left, then I would see what lay within its walls. The night my son truly cast me out of his life, it rained harder than I had seen in years. The penthouse windows trembled under the storm as I sat quietly in a corner, watching people toast and laugh in what used to be my living room. Adrian had invited his new wife Bianca's friends, none of whom even glanced my way, except to whisper behind champagne glasses. The place smelled of perfume and wine instead of the warm dinners I used to cook there. I clutched my handbag close, feeling like a ghost in my own home. Bianca swept across the room in a crimson dress that glittered beneath the chandelier. She leaned in to whisper to Adrian, and the two of them shared a laugh. Then she looked at me, her smile sweet on the surface, but sharp as a knife beneath. I knew that look. I had seen it on women in business meetings with Charles when they wanted something and were willing to wound to get it. At midnight, the last of their guests disappeared into the storm with umbrellas and laughter. I rose, thinking perhaps Adrian would ask me to help clear the glasses, perhaps remember that I was still his mother. Instead, he disappeared into the bedroom and reappeared moments later holding my suitcase. My suitcase, the same one I had used at Charles's funeral 3 weeks earlier. "Mother," he said casually, as though this were some minor errand, "it's time for you to go." The words hung heavy in the air, heavier than the thunder rolling outside. "Go?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "Adrian, where would I—" Bianca stepped forward, her high heels clicking against the marble. "Don't pretend you don't have somewhere to go," she said sweetly, though her eyes glittered with cruelty. "You have that little garage your husband left you. Perfect for someone who doesn't need much." She placed her manicured hand on Adrian's arm and smiled, as if she had said something clever. My knees nearly gave out. I gripped the doorway to steady myself, staring at the man who had been my baby, my boy, the one who had once clung to my skirt when thunder frightened him. Now he stared at me with no softness at all, only annoyance. "Adrian," I whispered, "this is still my home. Your father and I—" He cut me off sharply, his voice cold. "No, Mother, this is my home. The will was clear, and frankly, you don't belong here anymore. I have my life, and you should settle into yours." Bianca smirked, brushing a lock of hair over her shoulder. "Besides," she added, "it's not as though you'll be on the street. Charles left you that garage, didn't he? A roof is a roof." He pressed the suitcase into my arms, and before I could find the words to beg or reason or even breathe, he pulled the door wide. The hallway stretched long and empty, the fluorescent lights humming like insects. He placed a hand against the doorframe. "Good night, Mother." Then the door shut. The lock clicked once, twice, final. I stood there in the hallway, the storm pressing against the windows at the end of the corridor. My hands shook so violently the suitcase nearly slipped from my grip. My own son had locked me out of the home where I had loved and cooked and laughed and mourned. He had locked me out like a stranger. Tears blurred my vision as I stumbled toward the elevator. When the door slid open, the draft of cold air carried the scent of rain inside. By the time I stepped out onto the street, the storm swallowed me whole. The rain plastered my hair to my face and soaked through my black dress, the same dress I had worn when I buried Charles. I lifted my face to the sky and let the storm wash over me, because fighting it felt pointless. The city blurred into streaks of water and light. Cars hissed past, their drivers too busy to notice an old woman clutching a suitcase on the curb. My heart felt as though it had cracked down the middle, and through that crack, humiliation and grief poured out. Then my fingers brushed against the small, rusted key in my pocket, the one Mr. Jacobs had pressed into my hand at the will reading, the garage key, Magnolia Street. I stared at it, the metal warm despite the storm, as if it carried something more than just a door's promise. For the first time, I wondered what waited for me there. I stood shivering in the rain until my taxi finally arrived. As the driver loaded my suitcase into the trunk, I looked up at the glowing windows of the penthouse, my son's laughter faintly audible even through the storm. My chest ached with betrayal, but my hand curled tight around the key. If that garage was all I had left, then I would face it. And perhaps, just perhaps, it would be enough to start again. The cab dropped me off on Magnolia Street, a quiet stretch of Pasadena I barely remembered. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the air heavy and damp. The neighborhood looked abandoned, its warehouses and shuttered shops long past their prime. I hugged my coat tighter, clutching the small bronze key in my palm until the edges bit into my skin. Across the street, beneath a flickering street lamp, stood the building that was now mine. A weathered garage with peeling paint, a rusted padlock, and a sagging roofline that seemed to groan beneath its own weight. It didn't look like an inheritance. It looked like a sentence. I dragged my suitcase across cracked concrete, the wheels bumping over weeds that had forced their way through. The garage loomed larger the closer I got, its doors shut tight, its windows covered in grime. My throat tightened. Charles had left me this forgotten relic? My heart pounded as I slid the key into the padlock, hands trembling so much I nearly dropped it. For a moment, I thought it wouldn't turn, that I would be locked out of even this. But with a reluctant click, the metal gave way. The door resisted when I pushed, groaning against years of disuse. Dust swirled into the air like ash, catching the beam of my flashlight as I forced the heavy panels apart. I coughed, stepping inside, my shoes crunching against gravel and broken glass. The air smelled faintly of oil and thyme, a sharp tang that made my eyes sting. For a moment, I regretted coming. This place looked like the kind of space that hid nothing but ghosts. Then the beam of my flashlight caught something metallic beneath a cloth cover. I froze. My pulse quickened. Carefully, I stepped closer and reached out. The canvas was stiff with dust, but when I pulled it back, my breath stopped in my throat. Beneath it gleamed chrome, untouched by years, polished to a mirror sheen. A Cadillac Eldorado. 1959, if my memory served right. The kind with fins that stretched out like wings, a relic of America's golden age. Its cherry-red body reflected the trembling light, as if it had been waiting for someone to open this door all along. My knees weakened, and I grabbed the nearest wall for balance. Charles, what had you done? Why had you hidden this from me? I moved to the next shrouded figure, hands shaking as I peeled the cloth away. A Porsche 356, ivory white, its curves sleek and perfect as though carved from porcelain. I remembered Charles mentioning 1 year ago in passing, a car he said was art on wheels. My chest ached with a sharp pang. He had bought it, and never told me. I kept moving, hardly daring to breathe. The third cover revealed a Shelby Cobra, its blue paintwork striped with white, coiled and ready like the snake it was named for. My reflection stared back at me from its surface, wide-eyed and trembling. I had seen this car in magazines, the kind that boasted of speed and power reserved only for the bold. Finally, I reached the last one. My hand hovered over the fabric as if it might burn me. Slowly, carefully, I pulled it back. An Aston Martin DB4, silver gray and timeless, the kind of car I had only ever seen in films. I remembered nights sitting beside Charles on the couch, watching old thrillers where men in tuxedos sped along coastal roads in machines just like this. And here it was, hidden in our name, waiting for me in a garage everyone thought worthless. I staggered backward, the flashlight clattering to the floor, its beam skittering across polished hoods and chrome grills. The garage wasn't a graveyard. It was a cathedral, a museum. My throat tightened, and I pressed both hands to my mouth to keep from crying out. Why had Charles kept this secret from me? For years, I believed I knew every part of him, his habits, his fears, his joys. Yet here was a side I had never glimpsed, worth more than anything we had ever discussed. A chill ran down my spine, not from the damp air, but from realization. These weren't just cars. They were treasures, investments, carefully chosen, perfectly preserved. I stumbled toward a workbench where a stack of leather-bound portfolios lay neatly arranged. My fingers fumbled through the pages, eyes scanning numbers I barely understood. Appraisals, provenance records, maintenance histories, each one documented down to the smallest detail. The total values made my vision swim. $12 million. $12 million, hidden beneath covers in a garage I had been humiliated with. Adrian had laughed at me, called me a useless old woman, told me this place was worthless. And yet, standing here, surrounded by gleaming steel and history, I realized my late husband had handed me something far greater than a penthouse in Los Angeles. I dropped into a chair against the wall, my hands still trembling. The storm outside had quieted, but inside me the thunder roared louder than ever. Part of me wanted to scream in triumph, to march back to Adrian and shove these papers into his smug face. But another part of me knew this was dangerous knowledge. If Adrian discovered the truth, he would never stop until he had it all. The rain tapped softly on the roof as I reached out to touch the Cadillac again, my fingertips grazing its flawless surface. I felt both awed and terrified. Charles, my Charles, had hidden a kingdom in plain sight and left it only to me. In that moment, the humiliation I had suffered began to harden into something else, something sharper. Adrian thought I was powerless. But standing in that garage, surrounded by $12 million worth of power, I realized I had been underestimated. I don't know how long I sat there, surrounded by those shining machines. Time seemed to lose its shape inside that garage. The storm outside had passed, but inside me, something else was still raging. Shock, disbelief, a flicker of hope I hadn't dared to feel in weeks. My hands shook as I rifled through the portfolios on the workbench, pages filled with careful notes and crisp documents, each stamped and signed, each proof that Charles had built this collection deliberately, not impulsively. He had known exactly what he was doing. That was when I noticed a plain white envelope taped against the inside wall, half hidden behind a calendar that hadn't been turned in years. The sight of his handwriting, Charles's bold, deliberate script spelling out my name, Lillian, made my breath catch. My knees wobbled as I pulled it free. The envelope felt heavy, as though it carried more than paper. I sat back down, staring at it for a long moment. My fingers couldn't stop trembling. Part of me was terrified of opening it, terrified of what truths it might reveal. But I had been left with humiliation and silence long enough. Slowly, I tore the seal. Inside was a folded letter, written on his favorite stationery, the cream-colored paper he always used when something mattered. The smell of his cologne faintly clung to it, and for a moment I had to press it to my lips, my eyes stinging with tears. Then I forced myself to read. "My dearest Lillian," the words began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the time has come for you to know what I kept hidden. First, forgive me. I never wanted to keep secrets from you, but I had to. For years I watched our son change. I watched ambition replace kindness, entitlement replace gratitude. I knew that if I left our wealth in plain sight, Adrian would consume it until nothing remained, and I could not let you suffer for his choices." I pressed my palm against my chest. The words blurred as tears slipped down my cheeks. He had seen it too. He had known. All those years I had tried to explain away Adrian's arrogance as stress, as youth, as the nature of business, but Charles had recognized it for what it was. The garage was my sanctuary. 6 years ago, when the doctors gave me my first diagnosis, I realized I had limited time. I began acquiring what you now see, cars chosen not just for beauty, but for their worth. They are an investment, one that would remain safe until you needed them, but they are only part of what I leave to you. I gasped softly, blinking rapidly as I read on. "In Santa Barbara, you will find a cottage. You remember the little one near the coast with the garden you loved? I purchased it quietly 3 years ago and placed it in your name alone. It is furnished, stocked, ready for you. It is not a mansion, not like the Penthouse, but it is a home, yours, safe and untouchable. My body shook as a sob burst free, the letter slipping from my hands to my lap. A home. He had known. He had seen what Adrian was capable of, and he had ensured that I would not be left wandering the streets. The image of the penthouse door slamming shut in my face, Adrian's mocking smile as he shoved my suitcase at me, returned with painful clarity. But now another picture layered over it. Charles, quietly planning, building me a refuge, protecting me even when I didn't realize I needed protection. I forced myself to keep reading, though my tears blurred the words. Adrian believes he has won. That is by design. I gave him what he would recognize as valuable, what would feed his pride. But what I have left you is far greater. You are now independent. You will never need his permission, his approval, his pity. What you choose to do with this fortune is yours alone. Perhaps in time, Adrian may prove himself worthy of your generosity. But until then, you must not let him know. Protect this secret. It is your shield. And my love, it is your freedom. By now, my sobs had become uncontrollable, filling the silent garage until my voice echoed back at me. He had known me better than I knew myself. He had given me not just money, not just property, but dignity. He had preserved my place in a world that my own son tried to push me out of. The last lines were written with a heavier hand, the ink slightly smudged, as though his hand had trembled when he wrote them. I trust you, Lillian, more than anyone. This was never about wealth. It was about giving you the power to stand tall, to live as you wish, to never bow your head again. Use it well. And remember, my love for you outlasts even death. I pressed the paper to my chest, curling around it as though I could hold Charles again. My body shook with grief, but beneath the grief was something else, strength. For the first time since the funeral, I felt him near me, not in the penthouse Adrian now claimed, but here, in this dusty garage filled with secrets. He had chosen me, believed in me, prepared me. I wiped my eyes, forcing myself to steady my breathing. The garage seemed different now, brighter even in its shadows. The cars didn't feel like relics hidden in shame. They felt like guardians, standing silently by, waiting for me to step forward. I traced my hand along the hood of the Aston Martin, whispering, "I'll honor you, Charles. I promise." But another thought crept into my mind, sharp and dangerous. Adrian didn't know. Adrian thought I had nothing but dust, and that ignorance was my advantage. I folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into the envelope, then tucked it close to my heart. When I finally stepped outside, the night air was cool, washed clean by the storm. I stood in the quiet Pasadena street, staring up at the faint glow of stars breaking through the clouds. In my hand, I still held the key to the garage, but within me, I carried something more, the key to my freedom, to my future. I was no longer the useless old woman my son had sneered at. I was the keeper of a secret empire, and for the first time in years, I felt strong enough to fight for myself. The morning after I read Charles's letter, I woke early with a heaviness in my chest and a fire in my stomach. The garage still smelled of oil and dust when I stepped inside, but now it felt different. It no longer seemed like a burden or a humiliation. It felt like a secret kingdom I had been entrusted with. I ran my hand along the hood of the Cadillac, whispering Charles's name under my breath. I wanted to believe I could manage this alone, but the truth pressed down on me. I had no idea how to value or protect something like this. That was when I thought of Victor Kane. Victor had been Charles's confidant for decades, a man whose eyes lit up at the sight of an engine, whose hands had touched more rare cars than most collectors even dreamed of. I hadn't seen him since Charles's funeral, where he stood quietly at the back, his weathered hands folded, his eyes red but steady. Reaching out to him felt like pulling on a thread from the past, a part of Charles's world I had never fully understood. I found his number in Charles's address book, written in bold strokes beside a grease smudge. My fingers trembled as I dialed. When he answered, his voice was deep, steady, carrying the weight of years. "This is Victor." "Victor, it's Lillian," I said softly, my voice catching. "Charles is Lillian." There was a pause, then a warmth that broke through the silence. "Lillian, I'm so sorry. I've been meaning to call, but grief has a way of stealing words." I closed my eyes, the tears rising again. "I need your help, Victor. Charles left me something, and I don't know what to do with it." He didn't press for details. "Text me the address. I'll be there." 2 hours later, a green pickup pulled up outside the garage. The man who stepped out moved slower than I remembered, leaning slightly on a cane, but his presence filled the street. His gray hair was brushed back, his eyes sharp beneath heavy brows. He looked at me, then at the garage, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe even dread. "Charles," he murmured, as if the name itself explained everything. I unlocked the doors, pushing them open with a grunt. Sunlight spilled across the floor, and the cars revealed themselves one by one, like a curtain rising on a stage. Victor froze in the doorway. For a moment, he didn't move at all. His cane slipped slightly, and he steadied himself against the frame, his eyes wide. "My God," he whispered, stepping forward slowly. His voice dropped to a reverent hush. He really did it. He walked to the Cadillac first, his hand brushing the polished fins. "A '59 Eldorado. Do you know how rare this is in this condition? This alone could fetch a fortune." He circled it like a priest at an altar, murmuring numbers and history. Next, the Porsche 356. He stopped dead, crouching slightly despite his cane. "Exquisite. Lillian, this isn't just a car, it's a piece of art. There are collectors who would wait years just for a chance to bid on this." He moved to the Shelby Cobra, his voice quickening with excitement. "Do you see this? Do you know what you have here? This car changed American racing. This one alone is worth millions. It's a legend." Finally, he stood before the Aston Martin DB4. His breath caught, and he pressed his hand to the silver hood. "This is the crown jewel." Crown. The DB4? Charles must have searched the earth for it. There are only a handful like this left in the world. I stood back, clutching Charles's letter in my handbag, my throat tight. "He left them to me, Victor. He never told me. I thought he'd left me nothing." Victor turned to me sharply, his eyes blazing. "Nothing? Lillian, this is not nothing. This is $12 million worth of rolling treasure. These cars are gold. They're better than gold. They're history. They're power." The number rang in my ears, even though I had seen it in Charles's papers. Hearing it aloud from Victor made it real. I sank onto a stool, my legs weak. Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Charles knew. He knew Adrian. He knew that boy would burn through anything shiny and simple. So he left you this, hidden, safe. He left you something Adrian couldn't understand." I wiped at my eyes, but Victor wasn't finished. He leaned on his cane, his gaze sweeping the garage. "You need to understand something, Lillian. These cars aren't just valuable, they're famous. Collectors around the world, auction houses, private buyers. They've all been hunting for cars like this. If word gets out, you'll have lines of people begging, demanding, scheming. Some will try to charm you. Some won't play fair." A shiver ran down my spine. I pictured Adrian's sneer, Bianca's cruel smile. If they knew, they'd tear this place apart. Victor seemed to read my thoughts. "Don't tell Adrian. Not yet. If he learns about this, he'll sell them piece by piece until there's nothing left but dust. Charles trusted you, Lillian. He gave you a shield. You must protect it." I nodded slowly, clutching my bag. The letter inside seemed to pulse against my heart, as if Charles were speaking through it. Victor placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone. I'll help you. I'll guide you. Charles would want that." The tears came then, slipping hot down my face. For weeks, I had felt like a woman drowning, pulled under by humiliation and grief. But in that moment, Standing beside Victor, surrounded by gleaming steel and Charles's secret, I felt something shift. For the first time, I wasn't powerless. Adrian thought he had won. Adrian thought I was nothing but a useless old woman. But here, in this forgotten garage, I held $12 million worth of proof that he was wrong. And with Victor by my side, I realized I might finally have the strength to show him just how wrong he was. While I was learning to breathe again inside the quiet of that garage, Adrian and Bianca were building a kingdom of noise. Word spread quickly through Los Angeles circles that the Penthouse on Wilshire had become a palace for late nights and endless parties. Neighbors complained of music thundering until dawn, of strangers parading through the marble lobby with bottles of champagne and glitter still in their hair. The penthouse that Charles had cherished for its view of the city lights was now a revolving door of decadence. Adrian thrived in the chaos. He strode through each gathering in tailored suits, clinking glasses, laughing too loudly, boasting of new investments. He liked to be seen, to be praised. Bianca, in her shimmering gowns and diamond earrings, was always at his side, her hand on his arm, guiding him with the ease of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. She leaned in with whispered suggestions, and he obeyed like a man under spell. At one party, Adrian stood at the head of the long dining table, raising his glass. "To the future!" he shouted, his voice already slurred. "To the empire we're building!" His guests cheered, lifting their glasses high. Behind him, Bianca's smile gleamed like polished steel. But it wasn't an empire they were building. It was a house of cards. Bianca's whispers weren't about family or stability. They were about startups that promised the moon but had nothing to show beyond flashy websites and empty slogans. Cryptocurrency schemes, wellness apps run by college kids, ventures with no foundation but quick profit. Adrian poured money into each one as if it would crown him king of Los Angeles. He never asked questions, never slowed down. He only wanted to be the man at the center of attention. The only things he slowed down for were the rituals of mockery. One evening, when the last of their guests had left, Bianca picked up a wooden box from the shelf, a box Charles had once used to keep cufflinks he wore on special occasions. She opened it, wrinkling her nose at the sight of the old pieces. "Outdated," she said flatly, tossing the box into Adrian's hands. "We don't need relics from the past cluttering this place. You're not your father. You're better." Adrian chuckled and hurled the box into the trash. The sound of it cracking against the bin echoed through the penthouse. My husband's things, discarded like scraps. Another night, one of Adrian's old college friends asked about me. "How's your mother doing? Haven't seen her around." Adrian smirked, leaning back in his chair. "She's fine. Probably fussing around that garage father left her. It suits her. Dust for dust." The table erupted in laughter. Bianca leaned over, kissing his cheek as though cruelty were something to celebrate. But beneath the glitter and the noise, cracks were forming. Creditors had begun calling. The bank was watching the accounts closely. Bianca knew it, though she never let it show to the outside world. Alone with Adrian, her voice grew sharp, her words slicing. "You have to double down," she told him one night as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city. "The only way to win is to risk more. Put in the rest of the money. Invest bigger. People respect boldness." Adrian rubbed his temples, the city lights reflecting in his glass of whiskey. "It's already a lot. If it fails?" "If?" Bianca snapped, her eyes narrowing. "It won't fail. Don't you want to prove to everyone you're not just living off your father's shadow? This is your chance, Adrian. Your mother has her garage. Let her play with dust. You are building the future." He stared at her, uncertain, but then her hand slid over his, and her smile softened into something seductive. "Trust me," she whispered. "This is how men like you make history." By the next morning, the transfers had gone through. More money into ventures built on nothing. More champagne ordered for the next party. More laughter echoing through the penthouse as if nothing could touch them. But money drains faster than it grows, and Adrian was blind to the tide slipping away. The penthouse, once a monument to Charles's steady hand, was now a stage where his son performed his downfall, and he was too intoxicated by Bianca's praise to see it. Meanwhile, I sat in my small kitchen in Pasadena, Charles's letter folded carefully beside my tea, listening to the rain tapping the window. I thought of my son's voice mocking me, and I thought of the gleaming cars resting silently in the garage. Adrian believed he had everything. He believed he was untouchable. But storms have a way of breaking illusions, and his storm was already on the horizon. I should have known the secret wouldn't stay quiet forever. The garage had become my sanctuary in the weeks since Victor's visit, a place where the dust and shadows felt like protection. Each day I would walk the aisles between the cars, tracing my fingers along polished hoods, whispering promises to Charles that I would honor what he left me. Victor had been true to his word, helping me catalog each vehicle, carefully explaining their histories, their worth, their danger. He told me to be cautious, to move slowly. But caution is a luxury when greed circles close. It was a Saturday morning when I heard the sound. Tires screeching outside, a car door slamming, then the crash of fists against the garage doors. My heart shot up into my throat. I knew that sound. I knew that voice, even before I heard it clearly. "Open up, Mother!" Adrian's shout tore through the stillness. "Open this damn door!" My hands shook as I fumbled for the key. Before I could decide whether to face him, the metal door rattled violently, the lock shuddering as if it would tear off its hinges. My chest heaved. There was no use hiding now. Slowly, I slid the key in, turning until the lock clicked and pulled the door open. Adrian stormed in, his face flushed, his eyes wild with rage and something close to desperation. He looked nothing like the boy I raised, nor even the confident man he pretended to be in his penthouse. This was someone undone, unmasked. He swept his gaze across the cars, his jaw tightening, his breath coming quick. "So it's true," he spat. "I heard rumors, but I didn't believe it. You've been hiding this from me. My father's collection, my inheritance." I clutched Charles's letter close against my chest, my voice low but steady. "This isn't yours, Adrian. Your father left it to me. He trusted me to protect it." His eyes burned into mine. "He trusted you more than his own son? You're telling me that man believed you? A woman who never worked a day in her life could handle this better than me? Do you realize how insane that sounds?" I flinched at his cruelty but stood my ground. "Charles knew you, Adrian. He saw what you've become. He didn't want this wasted. He didn't want it destroyed." Adrian's face twisted. He strode forward, his hand slamming down on the hood of the Shelby Cobra, the sound echoing through the garage like a gunshot. "You don't get to keep this from me. This is mine by blood, by right." His hand dragged across the paint, leaving a smear, his disrespect vibrating through me like a knife. "Stop it!" My voice rose, sharper than I expected. My entire body trembled, but I refused to look away. "Your father didn't trust you. He trusted me, and you've proved him right every single day since his funeral." Adrian's chest heaved, his fists clenched. He was shaking, though whether from rage or fear I couldn't tell. "You think you can stand in my way? I'll take you to court. I'll have lawyers tear you apart. You won't last a minute, Mother." I lifted the envelope in my hand, my grip tight. "Then read this. Read your father's words. He explains everything." Adrian snatched the letter from me, tearing it open. His eyes moved quickly across the page, his breath uneven. The silence between us grew thick, broken only by the sound of his shallow gasps. Then he let out a harsh laugh, bitter and sharp. "He wrote this to you? He said I wasn't worthy, that I would squander it? He had no faith in me at all?" His voice cracked as he shouted, "He was supposed to believe in me. He was supposed to give me everything." He crumpled the letter in his hand, veins bulging in his neck. His eyes darted back to the cars, greed overtaking grief. "I don't care what this letter says. This is mine. You think you can stop me?" I stepped closer, my voice low but iron hard. "Yes, because Charles made sure you couldn't touch it, and because I won't let you." Adrian's nostrils flared, his body shaking. He slammed his fist against the hood again, the echo reverberating through the space. But this time I didn't flinch. I stood tall, my hands steady at my sides. For the first time, I wasn't just a mother pleading with her son. I was the keeper of Charles's legacy. Adrian glared at me, breathing heavily, sweat glistening on his brow. For a moment, I thought he might lunge, that he might try to tear the keys from my hand, but then his eyes shifted, his lips curling into a sneer. "Fine. Keep your little kingdom of dust and metal, but don't think this is over. You'll regret crossing me." He shoved past me, storming out into the sunlight, slamming the door so hard it rattled the frame. The garage fell silent again, but my heart pounded in my chest like a drum. My hands were shaking, yet my spine had never felt straighter. Adrian knew. He knew the truth now, and the battle lines had been drawn. The garage still echoed with the sound of Adrian's rage long after he stormed out, but I knew I couldn't stay buried in his anger. Charles had written in his letter about a cottage in Santa Barbara, a place he had quietly purchased and placed in my name. At first, I hadn't believed it, but after the confrontation with Adrian, I knew it was time to see it for myself. I needed distance from Los Angeles, from the Penthouse, from every reminder of humiliation. I needed a place that was mine alone. The drive up the coast was long and winding, but with each mile the air grew lighter. Salt from the Pacific drifted through the open window, and the sun painted the cliffs in gold. For the first time since Charles's funeral, I felt like I could breathe deeply, without the weight of grief crushing my chest. The directions Charles had left were clear, and soon I turned onto a narrow lane lined with eucalyptus trees, swaying in the ocean breeze. At the end stood a white cottage with blue shutters, its garden overflowing with wild roses and lavender. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. He had chosen this. He had chosen it for me. I stepped out slowly, my shoes crunching on the gravel path. The cottage seemed to smile at me, its roof sloped with age, its porch framed by pots of geraniums. It looked lived in, but not abandoned, cared for, waiting. I fumbled with the keys Charles had left me, and when the lock clicked, I pushed the door open to a rush of sunlight and the faint scent of cedar. Inside, the cottage was warm and inviting. A patchwork quilt lay folded on the couch, and shelves brimmed with books Charles had loved. Photographs lined the mantel, some of us together, some of landscapes he had taken on trips I hadn't known about. On the table sat a vase of dried flowers, their colors faded but still beautiful, as though he had left them for me to find. My knees weakened. This wasn't just a house. It was a love letter made of wood and stone. "Mrs. Parker?" a voice called gently from outside. I turned quickly, startled, but relaxed when I saw a woman standing at the gate. She was about my age, with silver hair pulled neatly back and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. She carried a basket of lemons and rosemary. "I'm Mildred," she said, stepping closer. "I live just down the lane. Charles used to visit, you know. He told me about you, about how he wanted this place ready for you. He was very proud." The words broke me. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I pressed a hand to my mouth. "He came here? He prepared this?" Mildred nodded, her expression tender. "Every detail. He wanted you to feel safe, to feel at home. He told me, 'When I'm gone, Lillian will have this. She deserves peace.' He said that more than once." My heart squeezed so tightly it hurt. I invited her inside, and she set the basket on the counter. As she spoke, she pointed out small touches Charles had left: the carved jewelry box he had placed on the dresser, the seashell wind chime on the porch, the journal tucked into the bookshelf with my initials embossed on the cover. Every item whispered of his care, his love, his foresight. I walked through each room slowly, my fingertips grazing the furniture. In the bedroom, the curtains were soft linen, embroidered with little blue flowers. In the kitchen, copper pots gleamed, polished and hung neatly. Even the pantry held jars of preserves, labeled in Charles's handwriting. My tears fell freely now, but they were not just of grief. They carried something gentler, something healing. That evening I sat on the porch with Mildred, sipping tea she had brought in a thermos. The ocean murmured in the distance, and gulls wheeled across the horizon. For the first time in weeks, my chest loosened. The cottage felt like an embrace, a place where I could rest, where the noise of Adrian's greed could not reach me. Mildred patted my hand gently. You're stronger than you think, Lillian. Charles knew it. That's why he did all this. He believed in you." Her words sank deep. I thought of Adrian, his face twisted in rage, his fist slamming against the cobra. I thought of Bianca's cruel smirk. And then I looked around me, at the roses Charles had planted, at the cottage he had chosen, at the treasures he had left hidden in Pasadena. For the first time, I didn't feel like a useless old woman. I felt like the guardian of something precious. As the sun dipped low and the sky turned pink, I closed my eyes and let the ocean breeze wash over me. I whispered to the memory of Charles, "I'll be all right. You gave me everything I need." And for the first time since his death, I truly believed it. While I settled into the quiet rhythm of Santa Barbara, Adrian's world in Los Angeles was unraveling. The penthouse that had once been a glittering symbol of triumph now echoed with arguments and unanswered phone calls. Creditors were circling. The startups he had thrown millions into collapsed one by one, their slick presentations and empty promises dissolving under scrutiny. And the money, Charles's money, was bleeding away faster than Adrian could replace it. Reports came in from the banks, overdue balances, margin calls, investors demanding explanations. Adrian waved them off at first, confident that the next venture would pay off, that his luck was about to turn. But luck has a cruel way of running out. By midsummer, his accounts were overdrawn, his credit cards frozen. The parties stopped, the champagne dried up, the penthouse grew quiet, save for the shouting that rattled through its marble halls. Bianca's patience, once dressed in silks and diamonds, frayed quickly. She prowled through the rooms like a lioness pacing a cage, her voice sharp and relentless. "You promised me, Adrian. You told me we'd be at the top. You said we were untouchable." Adrian paced the living room, his shirt unbuttoned, his face slick with sweat. "It was a temporary setback. I just need more capital. One good investment, and everything will come back. You'll see." She laughed bitterly, throwing her glass into the sink so hard it shattered. "More capital? From where? From your mother's garage?" Her eyes narrowed, vicious. "That's all you ever wanted, isn't it? Her money, her assets. You don't love her. You don't even respect her. You just need her to keep feeding you." The words hit him like a slap. His jaw clenched, his eyes flashing. "Don't talk about my mother like that," he snapped. Bianca stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. "Please. You only kept her around because you thought she was weak enough to control. But she played you, Adrian, just like your father did. She's living quietly somewhere, holding all the cards, and you—" She jabbed her finger into his chest. "You are nothing without her money." His hands shook as he grabbed her wrist, but she yanked it free, her eyes filled with contempt. "Do you think I married you for your charm? Your ambition? No. I married you because you promised security, because you dangled wealth in front of me like a prize, and now look at you, pathetic, broke, desperate." Adrian's voice cracked, equal parts fury and pleading. "Bianca, don't leave. We can fix this. I'll find a way. I'll talk to her. I'll get what we need. Just give me time." But Bianca was already slipping off her ring, tossing it onto the marble counter with a clink that echoed like final judgment. She grabbed her handbag, her heels clicking against the floor as she strode toward the door. "I'm done waiting. I won't drown with you. Enjoy your empty palace, Adrian. It suits you." The door slammed behind her, and the sound reverberated through the hollow rooms. Adrian stood frozen, his chest heaving, his hands gripping the counter until his knuckles whitened. He had lost the money, the parties, the friends who had vanished the moment the champagne ran dry. Now he had lost Bianca too. He sank into a chair, staring at the city lights flickering beyond the glass wall. They mocked him, twinkling like distant stars he could never reach. His reflection in the window looked older, harsher, broken. In the silence that followed, only one thought consumed him: his mother, the garage, the cars, the inheritance he believed was stolen from him. Rage simmered beneath his grief, twisting into something sharper. He would find her. He would take what he thought was his. But for that night, all he had was an empty penthouse and the bitter taste of failure. I had grown used to the sound of the ocean outside the cottage in Santa Barbara, its steady rhythm soothing me in ways the city never could. The roses Charles had planted were beginning to bloom, and Mildred often stopped by with her kind words and baskets of fruit. For the first time in months, I felt as though I was healing. Yet peace is fragile, and mine didn't last. One afternoon, as I was sitting on the porch reading Charles's journal, a sleek black car pulled into the lane. The contrast was jarring against the quiet charm of the cottage. A young man stepped out, his suit pressed sharp as glass, his leather briefcase tucked beneath his arm. His smile was polite, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Parker?" he asked, his voice smooth, practiced. "Yes," I said cautiously, setting the journal aside. He extended his hand. "Ethan Cole. I represent your son, Adrian Parker." I froze, my stomach sinking. Of course Adrian hadn't given up. Of course he would send someone to do what his anger couldn't. I shook Ethan's hand briefly, my fingers cold, then motioned for him to sit on the porch. He didn't sit. Instead, he opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder, his tone softening into something meant to sound sympathetic. "Your son is in a difficult position, Mrs. Parker. He's lost a great deal recently. Investments went bad, his wife left, the bank is circling. You must know how hard that is for a man trying to honor his father's legacy." My lips tightened. Adrian has made his own choices. Ethan's eyes flickered, but he kept smiling. "Perhaps. But he's still your son. And I think, deep down, you don't want to see him destroyed. I don't believe any mother does." He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "You have the power to help him. Those cars in Pasadena, they could pull him out of this hole. If you signed over just one or two, you could save him. Isn't that what family is for?" I felt my heartbeat quicken, anger stirring beneath my ribs. His words were smooth, wrapped in the guise of compassion, but I could hear the steel beneath them. He wasn't appealing to fairness. He was appealing to guilt. I straightened in my chair, my hands steady now. "Family is about love, Mr. Cole. It's about respect. It's about standing by each other when it matters. What it isn't," I said, my voice sharpening, "is a blank check to cover greed." His smile faltered, but only for a second. He adjusted his tie, pressing forward. "Mrs. Parker, I understand your position, but Adrian feels betrayed. He believes his father overlooked him, left him nothing of true value. That kind of pain can eat at a man. Wouldn't it be better for everyone if you eased that pain? Isn't reconciliation worth more than a garage full of steel?" I leaned closer, my eyes locking on his. "Tin Mao too," I said slowly, "is not about enabling selfishness. It's not about letting your child destroy everything you and your husband built. I won't hand him the tools to burn what's left." For the first time, Ethan's polished mask cracked. His jaw tightened, and he closed the folder with a snap. "Then you leave me no choice but to escalate this, Mrs. Parker. If you won't be reasonable, perhaps the courts will force you to be." I stood, my voice calm but unyielding. "Go ahead. Take me to court. Bring your papers and your arguments. But you will never change the fact that Charles trusted me, not Adrian, and no judge in this country can rewrite that letter." Ethan hesitated, the fight draining from his posture. He gave me one last long look, as though weighing something he couldn't say aloud, then gathered his briefcase. "You're stronger than he said you'd be," he muttered, almost under his breath, before turning on his heel and walking back to the car. The engine roared to life, and the sleek black vehicle disappeared down the lane, leaving dust in its wake. I sank back into my chair, my hands trembling only now that the danger had passed. Adrian was not done. I knew it in my bones. But neither was I. For the first time, I felt the truth settle deep inside me. I was no longer the woman he could laugh at, discard, or manipulate. I was Charles's widow. I was the keeper of his legacy. And I would fight to protect it, even if it meant standing alone. It happened faster than even I imagined. One day, Adrian was still clinging to the scraps of his reputation, strutting through the Penthouse lobby as if he were king of Los Angeles. The next, His empire collapsed in full view of the city. The bank made the first move. Notices had been piling up for weeks, but Adrian ignored them, convinced another deal would save him. Then one morning, the sheriffs arrived with documents in hand. The penthouse, the crown jewel of his inheritance, was no longer his. Within hours, movers were carrying out furniture, boxing up suits and cufflinks, stripping the space down to its bare marble bones. The neighbors gathered in the hallways, whispering as the spectacle unfolded. But the humiliation didn't stop at eviction. Reporters had caught wind of the story. Cameras crowded the sidewalk outside, lenses trained on the once-celebrated heir of Charles Parker. Headlines ran in bold across the morning papers and websites. Heir to fortune faces foreclosure. Penthouse seized in financial collapse. Photos of Adrian in tailored suits, laughing at parties, were now plastered beside images of him pale and disheveled, his hair unkempt, his tie askew. I wasn't there, but Mildred showed me the footage on her tablet that evening. I watched as Adrian stumbled down the penthouse steps, boxes clutched in his arms, his face red with fury. Flashbulbs erupted like fireworks, blinding him, trapping him in a storm he couldn't escape. "Adrian! Adrian!" reporters shouted. "How much did you lose? Did your wife leave because of the bankruptcy? Do you blame your mother for cutting you off?" He threw up his hands, his voice breaking. "You don't understand. None of you understand. This isn't what it looks like." But every word he spoke was drowned beneath the relentless clicking of cameras. His protestations were swallowed by the whir of lenses and the shouts of strangers. His friends, the same ones who had filled his penthouse with laughter and champagne, were nowhere to be found. The only crowd left was there to watch him fall. When the video ended, I sat in silence. My hands gripped the arms of my chair so tightly my knuckles whitened. A part of me ached, seeing my son so undone. But another part, deeper, quieter, knew this was the justice Charles had predicted. Adrian had mocked me, cast me aside, and squandered what had been entrusted to him. Now the world saw what he truly was, a man who had traded legacy for vanity and lost it all. That night, as the ocean wind swept through the open windows of the cottage, I whispered to Charles, "He's learning. Maybe too late, but he's learning." And though guilt tugged faintly at my heart, it was outweighed by something else. The certainty that Adrian's humiliation wasn't just chance, it was consequence. The knock on my cottage door came at dusk, when the sky burned orange over Santa Barbara and the waves crashed louder than usual. I knew before I opened it who it was. My son stood there, not the polished Adrian who once prided himself on Armani suits and champagne smiles, but a man undone, his shirt wrinkled, his face drawn, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "Mom," he croaked, his voice almost unrecognizable. "Please, I need to talk." I stepped aside silently, letting him enter. The living room, with its warm firelight and the smell of fresh rosemary bread cooling on the counter, stood in stark contrast to his disheveled form. He lingered at the threshold, as if the comfort inside mocked him. Then, without warning, he dropped to his knees on the rug. "Forgive me," he whispered, his hands clutched at my skirt like a desperate child. "I was wrong. About everything. I thought I was smarter, stronger, better, but I was a fool. They took everything. The penthouse, the cars I leased, the accounts. Bianca's gone. Everyone's gone." Tears streaked his face, raw and unguarded. It was the first time in years I'd seen him like this, stripped of arrogance, stripped of power. For a long moment I stood frozen, staring at the boy I once cradled in my arms, now broken before me. "Adrian," I said quietly, my voice steady, "you threw me out in the rain. You called me useless. You locked the door behind me as if I were nothing. And now you expect me to forget?" He banged his fists against the floor. "I was blinded. Don't you see? I was chasing shadows. I thought Dad left me everything that mattered, and you were nothing but an afterthought. But I was wrong. He trusted you, not me. He gave you the real inheritance, and I can't survive without your help." My chest ached, but I didn't let it show. I leaned down, meeting his desperate eyes. "Help comes with conditions, Adrian. If you want my hand, you will earn it." He flinched, his lips trembling. "What conditions?" "You will find real work, honest work. No more get-rich-quick schemes. You will submit to financial oversight, not $1 spent without accountability. And most of all, you will apologize. To me, to your father's memory, to yourself." He stared at me, disbelief giving way to fury. "You're dictating terms? To your own son? I'm blood, Mom. I deserve—" I cut him off, my voice sharp as steel. "You deserve nothing you haven't earned. Charles saw that, and now so do I." He surged to his feet, towering over me, rage twisting his features. His fist slammed down on the wooden table, rattling the vase of fresh lilies. "This is insane! You'd rather watch me rot than lift a finger? You'd rather let your only son crawl like a beggar?" I didn't flinch. "I would rather see you rebuild as a man than live forever as a spoiled child." The words hung between us like a sword. He trembled, his anger cracking under the weight of truth. Finally, the fight bled out of him. His shoulders sagged, his voice broke into a sob. "I can't do it alone, Mom. I don't know how." I reached out then, placing my hand over his. "Then you'll learn, with guidance, with humility. If you agree to my conditions, I'll help, but only then." He collapsed into the chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time in his life, Adrian Parker wasn't the heir, the playboy, the master of the penthouse. He was simply a son, brought low, forced to face the mother he had scorned. And in that moment, the power shifted entirely. The woman once mocked as a useless old woman held all the cards. The morning after Adrian's breakdown, the air felt lighter. He had left the cottage with his head bowed, a promise lingering on his lips that he would try to live differently. Whether he meant it or not, I couldn't control. What I could control was my own future. For the first time in years, I felt clarity settle in my chest. Victor came by not long after, his boots crunching on the gravel path as he carried a stack of folders under his arm. "You're ready, aren't you?" he said with a knowing smile as I ushered him inside. "I am," I answered, and I realized I meant it. Together, we spread out the documents on the table, the appraisals, the auction contracts, the letters of interest from collectors across the country. The cars had sat in dust and silence for decades, but now they were keys to a new beginning. After much thought, I decided to sell most of them. The Cadillac Eldorado, the Aston Martin, the Porsche, all would go to new homes where they'd be cherished. But the Shelby Cobra, Charles's favorite, I would keep. It wasn't just a car, it was a piece of his spirit, a reminder that strength could be quiet but unshakable. When the auctions began, Victor handled the logistics, but I insisted on attending the first one in person. Rows of bidders in sharp suits filled the gallery, their eyes glinting with greed and admiration. When the gavel fell and the numbers climbed into the millions, I felt no regret, only pride. The garage that Adrian mocked as worthless had become the foundation of my independence. With the proceeds, I did not buy mansions or jewels. Instead, I met with advisors, lawyers, and community leaders. Slowly, the idea formed into something concrete, a foundation in my name, dedicated to helping women of my generation who had been silenced, overlooked, discarded as useless. Women like me, who had been told their best years were behind them. The day the foundation opened, I stood at a modest podium, Victor at my side. Cameras flashed, but for once I did not shrink from them. I looked out at the crowd, young volunteers, older women with hopeful eyes, journalists scribbling notes, and spoke the truth I had carried in my chest for too long. "They called me useless," I said, my voice steady. They pushed me aside, locked the door behind me, laughed at what I had left. But what they didn't see is that even in dust, even in silence, value waits, strength waits, and sometimes the life you think is over is only beginning. The room erupted in applause. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I held my chin high. Later, as the evening wound down, Victor handed me a glass of sparkling cider. He studied me for a long moment before asking, quietly, "So, Lillian, are you ready to move forward now?" I looked out the window at the setting sun, the horizon painted in gold and lavender. My hand brushed against the keychain of the Shelby Cobra in my pocket, warm and familiar. Then I turned back to Victor, a smile tugging at my lips. "I'm not just ready," I said, my voice sure. "I've only just begun." He raised his glass, and for the first time since Charles's passing, I laughed freely, unafraid of what tomorrow might bring. Weeks turned into months, and I kept myself busy with the foundation. The work was demanding but fulfilling, meeting women who had stories so much like mine, women who had been cast aside by their own families or made invisible by society. Each time I saw their resilience, I felt stronger myself. Yet even as I poured myself into this new life, there was one question that lingered, one wound that hadn't yet healed. Adrian. I hadn't seen him since that night in the cottage when his anger cracked open into despair. I heard little bits from Victor, who still lived closer to Los Angeles. He mentioned once that Adrian had been spotted working at a local community center, nothing glamorous, nothing like the Penthouse days. At first, I dismissed it as a rumor. My son, humbled? My son, actually working? It seemed impossible. But one afternoon, as I was planting roses in the cottage garden, I heard the crunch of footsteps on the gravel. When I looked up, there he was, Adrian. Not in a suit, not in polished shoes. He wore jeans and a faded shirt, and there was a tiredness to his face that seemed less like defeat and more like quiet acceptance. He looked older, softer. "Mom," he said gently. I stood, brushing the dirt from my gloves, unsure whether to open my arms or brace my heart. "Adrian." He walked closer, hesitating before reaching into his pocket. Slowly, he pulled out a small box, worn at the corners. When he opened it, my breath caught. Inside lay Charles's old wristwatch, the one Adrian had snatched years ago, parading it as his trophy. Its face was scratched now, the leather band worn, but it still gleamed faintly in the sun. "I've been holding on to this," he admitted, his voice low. "At first because I thought it made me powerful, but lately I realized it was just a reminder of how far I'd fallen. I don't deserve to keep it. It was his. It should be yours." He held it out, his hands trembling. I took the watch, the weight of it pressing memories into my palms. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Adrian," I whispered, "why now?" He swallowed hard. "Because I've been working at the center downtown. It's nothing big. I clean, I help with food drives, I sit with people who don't have anyone else. And every day, I see faces that remind me of what I did to you. I treated you like you didn't matter, like you were in the way. And I was wrong. I don't expect a second chance, but I need you to know I'm trying." For a moment, the garden was silent except for the sea breeze stirring the roses. His words were clumsy, but they were real. I felt the truth in them, the cracks in his pride finally mending into something human. He looked down, his voice breaking. "Can you forgive me?" I reached out, placing my hand gently on his cheek. His skin was rougher than I remembered, his eyes wet. "Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through once, Adrian. It's a path you walk every day. I can't erase what you did, but I can acknowledge what you're trying to do now. That is the beginning." His shoulders sagged with relief, though tears ran freely down his face. For the first time in so long, I saw not the entitled heir or the arrogant son, but the boy who once ran through the yard with scraped knees, calling for me when he fell. I pulled him into an embrace, brief but real. The watch gleamed between us, as though Charles himself bore witness to this fragile truce. When he pulled away, Adrian whispered, "Thank you, Mom. I'll keep walking." And for once, I believed him. The day was warm and bright, the kind of afternoon Charles would have loved. The Pacific stretched wide and glittering beside me as I eased the Shelby Cobra onto the coastal highway. The engine purred beneath my hands, steady and strong, just like the heartbeat of something timeless. The wind rushed through the open car, tugging at my silver hair, carrying the salt and freedom of the ocean air. For years I had felt caged, first by grief, then by Adrian's cruelty, then by my own fear. But now, with the road unfolding endlessly before me, I felt unshackled. The steering wheel fit perfectly in my grip, and for the first time since Charles's passing, I wasn't surviving. I was living. As the miles passed, the memories flickered like mile markers. The humiliation at the lawyer's office, the rain-soaked night on Adrian's doorstep, the dust and shadows of the garage, the letter that had broken me open and sewn me back together. I thought of Victor, his steady counsel, of Mildred with her gentle wisdom, of Adrian, finally humbled, walking a road toward redemption. And above all, I thought of Charles, whose foresight and faith had lit a path for me when I believed I had none. The sun lowered toward the horizon, painting the sky with ribbons of gold and crimson. I pressed my foot on the accelerator, the cobra roaring in response, and let the moment wash over me. "They called me a useless old woman," I said softly, the words rolling into the wind as if carried to every place I had once been dismissed. But in a dusty garage, I found the value of my life waiting for me all along. The road curved along the cliffs, the ocean sparkling below, gulls wheeling overhead. I laughed, clear, unburdened, almost childlike. The years of silence, the years of being overlooked, were gone. Ahead was only the horizon, and I was ready to meet it. The camera of memory would hold the image, silver hair flying in the sea breeze, hands steady on the wheel, the Shelby gleaming like a jewel against the setting sun. And as the light dimmed, I whispered one final time into the open sky, "Charles, I'm finally free." The ocean answered with its endless song, and I drove on,